Once you have all of your information gathered together in your table, then the next thing you want to do is go to the course wiki, Go Nuts. So you guys can be kind of clicking around on there now or after I finish telling you about this. But once you get there, the very first most important thing is to make sure you're logged in. A lot of times you'll be trying to do things and be like, why isn't this working? And it'll be because you forgot to log in. So just make sure you log in.
Right. And we make you log in because otherwise spammers will create all sorts of weird pages of porno links on them. So
Yeah.
because that happens.
Good bueno.
So the sidebar in GoNuts looks something like this, except it's got updated links for your class right now. So there's going to be help pages. You can read about those on your own time anytime you want. There's going to be the course page for this semester linked right there on the left side. And then the two most important links besides that you need to look at are creating a gene page and creating a new literature page. So make sure you log in. The login link is a tiny little thing in the top right corner. It says login. Remember that all of your contributions are going to be visible to anyone on the site. So first thing you do after you've got your things filled into your table is going to be creating a literature page. So you click on that link here and then you enter your PubMed ID and you click submit, and then that will bring up the literature page here. So every literature page now it's going to have the kind of information that you would see on the PubMed page, and then down here it's also going to show you any annotations that have already been made to that paper. So let's say you found this great paper and you're like super excited, this is probably going to be good for class. So sometimes before you read it, you probably want to go check to make sure it hasn't already been annotated. So you can go put in the ID and then see if there's any annotations on it. That's a good first
And what we'll
step.
do is we'll fetch all the annotations that are in QuickGo and in the wiki. So
Right.
Yep.
Okay, so if you, however, look and you're like, oh no, there are already annotations on this paper, that doesn't mean that you can't annotate. You need to make sure that the annotations that are listed don't use your paper, because remember, you can annotate to outer membrane as many times as you want on the same protein, as long as the evidences are different. So if it comes from a different piece of evidence. Okay. So now if you go back to the main page, these are the things that we showed you. Up there it says that I'm logged in, JRR. Those are the three most important places that you might want to be clicking. You can also get to the competition page from the link on the front page there. This is the actual front page of Go Nuts.
or in the little header.
Or in the header. That's right. There'll be a header up at the top that'll tell you what round we're in at all times.
Yeah, the header has a tendency to break, so don't necessarily rely on it.
Okay, so if you go to our page, our class page, there will be something called the scoreboard, and this is where it's going to keep track of the entire class's annotations over the entire competition period. And the two teams will be listed here, and I think we're about to add another team maybe to our competition from the Philippines.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And so it'll have the team names, and then it'll tell you what round we're in and how many points and where everybody stands and all that sort of thing. And there are also several tabs up here. So this first scoreboard tab has like the overall standings, and then there'll be a separate set of tabs, just these first two, that'll tell you for the round that we're in. So there are several rounds that we'll be going through. If you look, once there are a bunch of annotations in there, you'll be able to click on each tab, and it'll show you the annotation with all of the pieces. So this is the protein, who put it in, what team they're on, when, and all that other information. Yeah, so these were Curtis's from a while ago, and then it'll tell you the status. So I'm going to talk about those a little bit more. So every time an annotation gets put in, the judges or instructors are going to look at it and they're going to assess the quality of the annotation. And these are the potential marks that any annotation can get. It can be perfectly acceptable, completely right, everything's great, it's ready to be put into the database. Or it might be requires changes. Some of it's okay, some of it's not okay. We'll give you some idea, hopefully, of what is potentially needing to be fixed. But check those and fix them. And once we get to the part of the competition where you can challenge each other's, these would be the ones that you want to challenge.
But you can challenge anything. In fact, you can challenge things that don't have a status yet either, if you're really bad.
Yes, it doesn't have to say requires changes. You can challenge ones that are marked acceptable. That's right. It could be that it's marked unacceptable. That means that the judges have looked at it and we just don't think it's going to work for a Go annotation. So move on, shed your tears, and
And
go
again,
to the next paper.
We could be wrong. You could figure out that there is a way to fix it in case you get points.
As
The thing is
you
that
can argue
the
with
required
us,
changes
for
are just,
sure.
we have a higher probability of getting something because at least there we've seen a way we think it can be fixed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. So I'm going to skip down
We're
here
not
to
almost
this
done.
flagged one. So especially at the beginning, you'll probably see a lot of your annotations get flagged. And that means we looked at it and we're talking about it, we're doing a little more reading, or we're pretty sure we figured out whether it's right or not, but we're giving you guys a little more time to look at it and either decide to challenge
Or talk to us.
Or talk to us, yeah. And so it will move from either flagged to unacceptable or acceptable, and requires changes will eventually move to one of the other two categories. Hopefully all of them will move to acceptable. And then there's these other two. You probably won't see too much of this updated by instructor one. This one we usually don't use until the very end of the semester, but this corrected through challenge means that someone challenged an annotation that was originally either flagged or required changes. Basically it wasn't quite right, and someone else fixed it and now it's been corrected. So blue check marks and green check marks are the ones that are eventually going to go into the database. Purple and yellow probably need some attention. Okay, and once you actually
Your personal score, so there's the class scoreboard, and there's also a scoreboard for your own user page, and there's a scoreboard for your team.
Right.
And so there's different versions of all these things, views on these. So in your personal scoreboard, you'll be able to see how many annotations you've got that count towards your grade.
Right.
Which is the most convenient way to see it, which you use your grade.
Yeah.
Okay.
So once an annotation has been assessed, it will have this assessment page, and in there it will tell you what kind of assessment, who did the assessment, and the most important part is this column over here where it tells you, usually the instructors or the judges will mark the things that are right or the things that are definitely wrong. So all of those pieces of the chart have checks right now. Sometimes they'll have X's, and then you'll know for sure that needs to be fixed. Sometimes it won't be listed, so you don't have to list all of these categories. If it's not listed, that might be something that you want to look at because we didn't mark it right or wrong. Yeah.
No.
And so sometimes we'll leave public notes there for you guys. That right now that says no notes given. Sometimes we'll leave a little message that might give you a clue of what needs to be looked at. All right, so now that's kind of a brief overview of the pieces of the site that you'll be using a lot. So now go ahead and go onto the site and log in, and you can just follow the directions and you'll see you're going to make a literature page, you're going to make a gene page, you're going to edit the table. It's kind of like point and click. It tells you what to do. After you make your literature page, same thing I showed you before, you go in, you put in the UniPro accession ID there, create page, and this is what the gene page will look like. It has the name of the organism, gene, protein, a whole bunch of different links that go to outside websites, and then this is what you can see for each gene page. It'll show you what annotations are already made. So in this example, we've got all of these rows. There are a whole bunch of them. I cut some of them out. And again, you can see if it's already been made or if it hasn't. It'll tell you here that these annotations came from UniProt, and it'll tell you all of the other pieces. So here, these are the different kinds of activities that have been, these are all activities and components that have been annotated for this one. Remember, if it's the same Go term but a new paper, you can still make the annotation. You want me to go through this part?
No, I just want them to show them how to make a gene page. Then they can make their gene page.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Okay, so what should I
So the notes,
Yeah.
So the notes, okay. So this is what the little table looks like when you're entering the annotation on the site. And the only part that you might not have written for your annotation table is the notes section. So this is where you're going to put in the organism name and the protein name as it's in the paper and as in UniProt, because sometimes they're not the same. And you also need to put a tiny little description of where you were looking in the paper. So this paper we read with you guys. We pretty much know what's in it, but you guys are picking the rest of your papers. We won't necessarily have read it before, and we will, if there's 12 figures and you annotated to figure 12, I'm gonna have to like start from the beginning and go all the way to the end to figure out what you're talking about, unless you tell me in the notes. So in the notes you should list what figure in the paper you base your annotation off of, and kind of a mini statement of what they show there. So we know your thought process.
Not as long as the paper itself.
Yeah.
It's right.
This is not a copy paste kind of thing. Ideally, it's just like in Figure 3 they showed that they used an enzyme assay to show this, or something like that.
And it's very straightforward, but this is, I mean, people miscode terms and stuff, but this is a very common mistake for student submissions, which is the note section. This is what people goof up the most. They forget the protein name from UniProt or what it's called or whatever. So
yeah, so if you don't get the notes right, someone can challenge your annotation and steal your points.
Yeah, and it's really easy to just add figure 6C to the annotation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so pay close attention to the notes too. And if as you're entering things in here, the individual pieces aren't filling in, just click the refresh button. Click the refresh button after you enter things, and it will show up.
100% hit refresh before you hit save row. Just do one final look through and make sure that things are what they should be.
Yep. Okay. Anything else I have to show them? There's lots of saving, so follow through the slides to save it several times.
Yeah, okay, and then once you save your row, you're gonna have to save the table also.
Yeah.
That's another common mistake, is people will stop and go away. And then
Yeah,
So you have to, so you hit save row, and then you hit save row. You save the table, and then you check that it actually did it
there.
before you go away.
Yeah.
So basically what you're doing is you're submitting you're appending a new row to this table that exists, and then you need to save the table with that new row in it.